While we're on the subject of Marjorie Taylor Greene, I want to show you a clip during a recent interview that is truly horrifying for what it represents about the moment we're in this country, and specifically the GOP. And it's just sometimes because I do this job, and then we'll get to this clip, but let me say this real quick. It's really easy, I've said it many times, to just kind of normalize it all. Yeah, Marjorie Greene said this today and that today and this thing today, and oh, Trump's being investigated left, right, and forward, backwards, and possibly committed all these different crimes and attempted to overturn American democracy, and yeah, whatever. Okay, we move on. What's the next story for today, right? And I really encourage us all to try not to do that. Not so that we're all stressed all the time, but so we're at least tapped into the importance of ourselves activating, motivating to push for change, and also attempting to rally others who aren't yet aware of these facts, and help them become privy to these facts and these concerns and these pretty dangerous set of circumstances that we're being confronted with on a daily basis because of the American right wing. So with all that being said, here is Marjorie Greene on the Steve Bannon podcast, The War Room, saying this.
And I didn't come to Washington, D.C.
Oh, and I should provide the context. Marjorie Greene got asked about the fact that she's introducing articles of impeachment for everyone under the sun these days, Biden and somebody else recently, and Secretary Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, and she just wants to impeach all the people that she doesn't like. Okay, so that's the question.
And I didn't come to Washington, D.C. to just be a team player. I didn't come here to make friends and hang out and have a nice time and go to parties and enjoy all the events here. I came here to truly change the Republican Party. I came here to make a difference and save America. I thought I was coming to support my favorite president, who is Donald J. Trump, but the election was stolen from him.
False.
The reason why I'm introducing articles of impeachment is to put a line in the sand. This is where our conference has to move to. This is where the Republican Party, the people in the House of Representatives, senators, Republican senators, everyone needs to understand this is the will of our base. This is the will of Republicans. They have had enough. They've had enough. And for 5 months, I'm working the process. I've also talked with leadership. I let everyone know I was doing this. I said, this is what I'm doing.
You told the 5 families in that meeting you attend?
I didn't tell the 5 families, but I spoke to people in the speaker's office. I spoke to the speaker.
You and I.
Okay, so what is she saying there? She's saying that she wants to make the GOP more like her. She said it before. And she wants to push essentially the Republican Party to the right, but not just, it's clear to specify this, not just to the right, like on policy, where traditionally you think, okay, the more you go right, maybe you get all the way into libertarian realm and you get into whatever. It's more than just right. It's suspending from, it's detaching from the normal political spectrum and going up into the hemisphere and detached from reality world. That's where she wants to bring the GOP. And in a sense, she's doing it successfully. She has an incredible amount of power within the Republican Party because when she says it's the, quote, will of, will of the base, yeah, talking about the GOP base, she is correct in a sense that she is representing some of what they want, and her views do represent a lot of, when she talks about the stolen election, a lot of that. Now, why do they believe that? Because people like her convince them to believe it, and then they point it at it and say this is the will of the base. So still the villain in this situation. But it is true that now the GOP has been taken over by an ideology that promotes a level of I'll use this phrase again, a detached from reality thinking that is really concerning and really dangerous. And the election is a really apt and one of the most pressing example of this with the modern Republican Party, because 63%, as I've repeated many times, of the GOP thinks that the election of Biden was illegitimate. So when she says, we believe, or I believe, but, people who support me believe the election was stolen, she's correct, again, because she and others convinced them to believe that. But now we have this movement that is, apologies for smacking my mic there, that is centered around and identifies a lot with things that just aren't true. So the reason why, as we have definitely discussed, I know you know this, but let's go through it. The reason why this is so concerning is just because a difference in policy is totally something you can work with. You think we shouldn't have universal health care. I think we should. Let's talk about it. Let's dive into the details. You accept facts, but you disagree on conclusions. Fine. Tax policy, whatever it might be. You think no minimum wage. I think minimum wage. We can have those discussions. And there are absolutely sets of data that can back up different views on different stances. But when a movement becomes a cult of personality around Trump, and one that accepts a complete lack of facts from the leaders when it comes to some of the structural, basic, foundational views that motivate that movement, how do you deal with that? How do you compromise even, or how do you interact? How do you discuss solutions? You can't really in a meaningful way. Because if you're looking up and saying there's no sun, and I'm saying there is a sun, and then here's a better example. If I am asking you to work with me, this is our problem we're trying to address, on getting to the moon, and you say there's no moon, and I say there's a moon, how are we going to come to some agreement, right? I need us to go to the moon. We need to address healthcare costs, okay, as one example. And you say there's no moon, and I say there is a moon. And so that's kind of what's going on here, right? I say I want to protect democracy based on the facts that are at hand with a movement threatening our democracy. But they think they're protecting the democracy because it was assaulted by Joe Biden, even though they don't have the evidence, right? It's really, really, really unfortunate. And so as Marjorie Greene works to successfully make the GOP more like her, she works to make it less able to be worked with, less able to be functional within a democratic process, within these institutions, and within a two-party system. And that's terrifying. And we're seeing the repercussions of that. We're seeing the way that that's causing stalls in progress. And even the debt ceiling is a good example of this, where they're manufacturing a crisis to try to leverage spending cuts. And in doing so, they're threatening to throw us into an economic crisis based on not raising the debt ceiling. And while this has been done before, the dysfunctional nature of our government has been present and is only going to get worse with the MAGA Republican ideology. And that's what Marjorie represents. And it's unfortunate that not only is she successfully making the GOP more like her, it's her goal, and that's her mission. And that's why I think it's so important to tell people, this is the face of the GOP. Trump, Marjorie, Boebert, Matt Gaetz, etc. Because it's the engine. It's driving the party. It's controlling the agenda. And we need the American people to reject in a powerful way this ideology if we're going to move on from it. And that happens at the ballot box, of course.